Hi, everyone.
Hi, welcome to our next episode in the Methods of Divination subseries. Today we're going to be talking about angel numbers and synchronicity. There's a lot of synchronicity with numbers, so we decided to group these two topics together into one episode.
When it comes to numbers, we're not going to sit here and act like we're experts. If there's a science to it, we don't know what the science is. We're vaguely aware of Nikola Tesla speaking to the power of the numbers 3, 6, and 9, and Medical Medium has mentioned the number 144 being the highest vibrational number there is. So we anticipate gaining more awareness around numbers at some point in the future, but we are here today to talk about our personal experience with numbers. We have been using numbers as personal guidance for over a decade now, and I'm excited for this episode. We got some good stories for you. So we're here to talk about how we use numbers and synchronicity in our lives. Let's start things off with a story of how angel numbers started for me. So the story takes place in the Bahamas. My parents live on a sailboat, and I had joined them for about a month over in the Bahamas. And so we're on the sailboat, and I start seeing the number 44 everywhere, to the point where it was kind of freaking me out a little bit. And so I told my family, and I said, hey, so something kind of weird is happening. Just so you guys know, I'm seeing the number 44 everywhere. And no one really knew what to think about it. Didn't really put much thought into it. Just heard me say that. And then literally the next night after telling them that, we're playing Rummy 500, which is a card game. And you have to total up your score after every round. And on the first round, my score was 44. And so I told everyone, like, see, look, my score is 44. I told you guys I was seeing this number everywhere. And here it is again. And then a couple of rounds later, my score was 44 again. So it was pretty crazy. I really didn't know what to think about it. So I did what most of us do in this day and age, and I Googled it. So I Googled, what does it mean to see the number 44 everywhere? And pretty much everything that came up said that it means that the angels are with you. I think I even remember finding a source related to the Bible or religion somehow, and even that referenced angels. And so that's when I figured, I was already on my spiritual path, and I took it as a sign, okay, the angels are around me for whatever reason, pushing me along my path, protecting me, assisting me, and they want to make themselves known. So that's how I first started learning about numbers.
And my introduction to angel numbers was when I first met Brandon. So I had never really had them in my awareness before, and he told me this story that he's telling you all, and I was pretty floored by it, and then my journey with numbers began.
Yeah, so after I noticed the number 44, I started seeing other number patterns, and I'm like, well, they got to all have different meanings. And that's when I, just through Googling, found the term angel numbers. And I went through different sources of what different numbers mean. And I found this source called Joanne Sacred Scribes. It's what resonates with me. It doesn't feel scammy. It feels authentic. It's well set up. She has a lot of numbers, and it feels, in my opinion, kind of high vibrational. It's just something I resonate with. And so I told my guides, I said, okay, if you want to get messages through to me using numbers, then know that I'm going to go to this source. So align your messages with the numbers on this source, because when you start using different sources on the internet, you start getting quite a big varying degree of possible messages for each number. Another thing I used to do before I settled on Joanne Sacred Scribes is kind of get the gist from many sources and find the common denominator. But anyways, I chose Joanne Sacred Scribes as my source.
And I use Joanne's Sacred Scribes too, but I kind of use a combination of sources. So I really like to use the first search result that comes up in Google, which these days is often the AI result. And also along the way, I've kind of used different sources that resonate. And I can feel when they resonate because I know that that's what's going on in my life. So feel it out for yourself. See if you can tell your guides that this is the source I'm going to use. I think that's very wise, but also be aware that there are many sources out there and to kind of see what resonates with what you're walking through in your life.
So after many years of working with numbers and looking up numbers, it's reached the point where I don't have to look up certain numbers when I see them because I already know what they mean. For example, when I see the number 555, I know big changes are right around the corner. And sometimes these are inner changes, sometimes these are outer changes.
And when I quit my job after working at the local hospital for 7 years, I was seeing 55 and 555 everywhere and on a daily basis. At work, when I was driving, my attention would be snapped to like the 55 mile an hour speed limit sign, and just everywhere I would catch at 5:55 p.m., 5:55 a.m. So it was really making known to me that this big change I was about to make was in alignment with my highest good.
Yeah, so the way your attention gets snapped, that's a good point, and we're going to jump back to that. But briefly, I want to go through a very vague sense of the basic numbers 1 through 9 that we have. And I emphasize vague, and I also want to emphasize this is personal. It's what the numbers mean to us. It's not what they mean to everybody or mean as a matter of fact. And so ones are new beginnings being created or being manifested, manifestation energy. Twos are patience. Threes is the ascended masters or self-mastery. Fours are the angels or archangels. Fives are change. Sixes tell me to stop worrying about money, focus on my spiritual path. 7 is about luck and success. 8s are about money or abundance. And 9s are endings or new beginnings.
And I feel like personally for me, 7s have also been there when I need to make changes within myself to be better aligned with my spiritual path. So that's just something that's been personal to me.
Okay, so like I said, it's a vague and basic rundown, but when you start mixing the numbers together, you get entirely new messages and themes that arise. And so it's to the point now where I can see some mixed numbers and know what they mean. But a lot of times, especially the mixed numbers, are the ones I'm looking up these days. And so let's jump back to how Sophia said her attention was snapped to the speed limit sign on the side of the road. There's a lot of things that happen with numbers that are synchronistic, as Sophia mentioned in the intro, and that's what gives value, I guess I'd say, to the fact that these messages are coming, because it's not like I look for these numbers or I randomly just see 333 and just, it's easy for your brain to recognize a pattern. And so I don't just see the number and be like, oh, I saw a pattern of a number, it must be a message. I'm a little more stubborn than that. And so I will have to see a number many times over the course of a few days to be like, okay, this number is following me around. This is pretty wild. And so having your attention snapped to anything, like if I'm just focused on something in the room and all of a sudden my head shoots all the way to the left and I connect with the clock at 444, that's possibly a message. These days I feel the subtlety of that snap and I trust it a lot more. In the past, I'd have to have that happen, like I said, over multiple days. There's times when we're watching movies and for no reason I have a thought and I want to say something, so I pick up the controller and I pause it. And when I pause it, it pauses at 3333 or something like that.
And another good example is when you haven't looked at the clock in hours and all of a sudden you need to know what time it is. What time is it? And you look at your phone and it's 444 or whatever number has been following you around. So very synchronistic, and what are the odds?
With that said, let's jump into some of our stories.
Our first story is about Bitcoin. We had been introduced to Bitcoin through some of our friends, and just it was coming into our awareness so much. And some of our close friends were deeply invested into it and telling us about the philosophy of it and how they believed in it and all that. And we were really just learning a lot about Bitcoin.
But here's the thing. We didn't care. We weren't drawn to it. I still don't care. I barely still understand the technology behind it. I'm not into investing. I didn't really like spending too much time in front of my computer. But we did notice, it was not lost on us, that Bitcoin was coming in from all angles, including one time on a hike in New Zealand. I start thinking about Bitcoin somewhat randomly, and I get a loud ringing in my ear, and about 2 steps down the path later, my attention snaps to the right, and I connect and make eye contact with an owl that was sitting in the tree. And a big part of the owl message, at least for me, is intuition. So it was something about use your intuition related to Bitcoin. In shamanism, they say there's no separation between the dreaming world and the waking world. And so when you have all these like synchronistic events around something, whether it's a dream or in real life, it's equally as important. It doesn't get more credit one way or the other. So we started noticing all about Bitcoin.
And later in that same trip, we had a friend join us. He lives in Australia, and he started talking about Bitcoin, and we're like, whoa.
Yeah, it's coming in from all angles, and we didn't do anything about it. We just noticed. Mm-hmm. Like, that's pretty much it. Until one day, I was sitting down on the angel board, and it was a message that I wasn't asking for as normal. I don't ask questions. I just let myself be surprised. And they said, buy Bitcoin. And I said, buy Bitcoin? Really? Okay, like, how much money should I put into Bitcoin? And they said, all of your money. And I was like, what? And I verified several times.
And yeah, when he told me that, I thought that was pretty wild and outlandish to put all of our money into Bitcoin. So that was my first impression.
Yeah, so we got the message, and we still didn't do anything about it. We mulled it over for quite a while, and here's where the story gets interesting. So, however many weeks later, we were driving between Trinidad, Colorado, and Boulder, Colorado, which is a couple hours, and we're on I-25 headed north, and I was like, so, Sophia, are we gonna buy some Bitcoin? Are we gonna put all of our money into Bitcoin? And she was like, well, let's ask for a sign.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, universe, if we're supposed to put all of our money into Bitcoin, can you please show us a sign? And then we just dropped it. We're like, all right, we asked, now we wait. And we continued on. Sophia was driving, and the date happened to be August 8th, so 8/8. And I was just scrolling through the news feed on my phone as Sophia's driving, and there's an article that said, today is 8/8. What does the number mean? So I clicked on it. I read it. It talked about abundance and finance and stuff, and read the article, closed it, started scrolling again. And like less than a minute later, Sophia was like,
my attention was just snapped to 88 on the odometer.
And I was like, that's interesting, because I was just reading an article about the number 88. And as if that wasn't interesting enough, right after I said that, we go, whoa, there's mile marker 88. We were literally passing it at that time, and then right behind mile marker 88 is exit 88. And we're like, holy crap.
So, yeah.
And so back to the point I made a minute ago, that there is no like separation between the messages of just what happens in the physical world like that versus any other way that they come in. So for all that to line up in the physical world like that is just incredibly synchronistic, to the point where we were like, And that all happened right after we asked for a sign. Like, go figure.
And we were on our way to see our friends who were heavily invested in Bitcoin.
Yeah, so that was our sign, and we invested, and this was in 2020, and every like 4 years or so, Bitcoin has a big run up, and it was perfect timing. We bought it, and a few months later, it made its big run up, so worked out for us. All right, here's a short one.
So this next one, I was at work and I was seeing 77 everywhere that day. And so I messaged Brandon like, yeah, I've been seeing 77 everywhere today.
I was sitting at home watching Britain's Got Talent on YouTube, and about a minute later, the comedian asks Simon for a number between 1 and 5,000. And Simon said, 777. So for all that to happen in my awareness within, a span of a minute there, it's just very synchronistic. All right, here's another one. I was on a backcountry snowboarding trip with one of my buddies, and the avalanche conditions were safe, but this was early in our backcountry experience, so we were not totally confident. We actually had not taken avalanche courses at the time, but there was a couloir, and a couloir is like a chute that goes down through the rocks on the steep part of the mountain. And the reason we figured it was safe was because it had slid within the past week. So once something slides without new snow on top of it, it's very unlikely that it's going to slide again. But nevertheless, we were not that experienced, so we are climbing straight up this thing. And I'm like kicking my boots into the snow, holding onto my snowboard, punching it into the wall of snow in front of me, and it's like climbing a ladder. We're going straight up this couloir. And my buddy knows that I'm into spiritual stuff. And so he goes, he's all freaked out, and he's like, hey, I don't know who you pray to and talk to when you do your stuff, but maybe you could ask him right now for some protection. And I was like, yeah, we're protected. I just acted confident, and we kept going. And a few minutes later, I had one of those moments where it's kind of like, what time is it? I don't even think I was curious about the time. Basically, for no reason that I can think of, I stopped, undid the zipper on my in my pants, and pulled my phone out of my pocket, and it was 444. And I was like, I yelled to my buddy, like, we're protected, we're good. I'm sure of it. I just saw the number 444. And that was a big one for me, and actually brought me a ton of relief because I fully understand for myself what that means. And then I wasn't faking my confidence anymore. I knew we were good.
This next story is about the number 222. We were in California with a dear friend of ours, and she was talking so much about the number 222 and how it was showing up so big for her in her life. She then gifted us a book and told us to read chapter 22. So later that day, we got on a flight and started to read chapter 22, and we noticed that page 222 was in chapter 22. When we got off the flight, we texted her the synchronicity of the chapter 22 and the page 222. So then we started driving home from the airport, and we had about a 3-hour drive home, so a long journey ahead of us, and along the way we had some stops to make, some errands to run, and things like that. And when we pulled in the driveway, put the car in park, and looked down on the clock on the car radio when we got home, and it said 222. And we were like, what are the chances of that happening? That is crazy.
Especially on the day where we had been talking all about the number 222.
And so what we think the message is in this unique particular situation was the message that was in chapter 22 on page 222 about really accepting people for who they are and as they come to you.
And if you see any of our posts on Instagram, we took a picture of it to send to our friends, so we will use that picture as the thumbnail for our Instagram post about this episode. Okay, that's it for our number stories. We got 2 more lined up for you that are going to be synchronicity stories. And the first one is about prayer. So I was home and I wasn't feeling too good. And as a result, I was having trouble falling asleep. A good friend had sent me a message on the Signal app that we use, and I didn't read it. I was more focused on my state of being. And as I couldn't sleep that night, I heard the lyrics twice, let him pray, repeated 3 times in a row. So it goes, let him pray, let him pray, let him pray. And so that happened twice. And so both times I heard the lyrics, I prayed. And then about 3 minutes after midnight, I heard the lyrics again. And so I prayed for a third time. And literally 5 seconds after getting the lyrics and praying for the third time, I decided to grab my phone finally and read her message. And what she had sent me was about praying. And so in my perspective, the timing of how all of this unfolded is a massive synchronicity. And so I can read here. She took a picture of a book, and I'll just read exactly what it said. The book is called A Book of Angels by Sophia Brandon. So it starts out of context giving a third reason for something. So it says, the third reason I could never have made up in my wildest imaginings. And then it goes into quotes. Because your prayers give us the energy to do our work of serving you. End quote. And it continues, until then, I had not realized that we are in a relationship with angels, with the spiritual dimension. We need them to help us with our work, but they need the energy of our thoughts, intention, and prayers in order to bring us aid. Therefore, we are called to pray with all our hearts and minds and souls and strength, and to look upon all things as coming from God. We are called upon to love ourselves so as to open up to the love of angels, and to love one another as we love ourselves, to open our hearts to love and accept that the universe is on our side. So there you go. I wasn't always a fan of prayer. I am these days. This is one reason. I've spoke about some other prayer stories and some other podcasts we've done, but it was all one massive synchronicity that night.
And the other synchronicity was literally like the week before that, I had received guidance in my dreams to pray from my heart and from that vibrational frequency. And so that is on another podcast as well. But this is related because it happened a week after.
Okay, one more synchronicity, and this is the final story for this episode. This was back when I was working as a plumbing apprentice before or during the time that Sophia and I were buying our first house together. And by first, that's the only house. It's the house we live in now. But I'd never bought a property before. Sophia had, but this was our first time. So I'm with the plumber, and I'm the plumbing apprentice. And on 3 separate jobs that week, we see a dead bird, like right near the entrance whatever house or apartment we're working on. And the plumber goes, well, you're a spiritual person. Why don't you look up what that means? And he was half joking, but I was like, yeah, good point. I should. So I Googled, what does it mean to see dead birds everywhere? And Google actually gave me an answer without having to click on any links. It was like their automatically generated answer. And it said it's a sign of new beginnings. It's a positive omen for new beginnings. And it's like, yep, cool. That's what Google says. So the synchronicity here is that we had a inspection on our soon-to-be house. And I drove out to the house to be present for the inspection, and I'm walking around it, and I get to the little patio that's outside of the master bedroom, and there's a dead bird laying right on top of the patio. And this is all like 2 days after I Googled it, literally. And so as I mentioned, it was our first time buying a property, which for me was very nerve-wracking. It's a big financial commitment, not something I'd done before, and didn't know what to expect out of the inspection, and we'd been waiting a long time for it, and blah, 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 blah. So it was just really good to have a divine synchronicity in a way that I knew I was guided in a positive direction to continue buying this house and get this message. It was a big stress reliever.
Yeah, definitely.
Before we got to closing day.
Now it's time for our soulful send-off. These angel numbers have come into our lives as a way to connect with the divine and really to connect with ourselves, leading us into a greater awareness of all that is around us and what is in our highest and best. So hopefully this can be either an introduction for you or a confirmation for you of how numbers can help you along your spiritual path.
Yeah, we have to figure out how to connect to our guides, and our guides have to figure out how to connect to us. And so if you figure out this language of numbers as we have, it just gives them another avenue to get messages through to you. I've spoken during my angel board episode that the angel board is really difficult. You have to meditate, be by yourself, it's slow. But like lyrics can come in anywhere, but so can numbers. Numbers can come in anywhere, and if you can notice them in any situation. So it's just another easy avenue for your guides to get messages through to you.
And also, how does synchronicity play into the way you're seeing the numbers? Is it a particular number sequence? Is it one number repeated? And how is that synchronistic in the way that it's showing up for you and really catching your attention?
And then speaking of synchronicity in general, numbers aside, synchronicity is a major way I've led my life, and I got some really good synchronicity stories coming up on future episodes. But when you're following synchronicity or when you're seeing synchronicity, you can rest assured that you are on your highest and best path for this lifetime. You're being guided, and it's just a major tool, I think, along my journey, and it can be for you too.
Every week, we share our most recent divine guidance in an audio recording called Oracle Offerings. Sign up for only $5 a month at patreon.com/Aspen Roots.